because we need a set of skills that are pragmatic and that really, as I said, cross the barrier between issues that might happen at home and issues that might happen at work to encompass the entire human experience. Because when we keep these artificial barriers up and say work is here and life is here, we neglect entire pieces of things in people's lives that create distraction, that make them feel stress and anxiety, that make them less able to manage the strategic aspects of the actual crisis. And so, unfortunately, we see this a lot with our executive clients, that they receive very narrow guidance. So a business crisis occurs and they get lots of PR feedback, or they get lots of strategic feedback from advisors like their lawyer or their CPA. But sometimes that fails to encompass things like strategy or branding or employee relations, HR. Or sometimes it ignores really relevant factors for an executive, like the leader's family, their community, how the people at their country club or on their block are talking about this crisis. So the duality is really jarring, especially as we talked about for business leaders who are facing relentlessness and vilification, maybe press exposure, but have all of these other things going on in the background. So our goal is always to think about it holistically and to look at what's really impacting the person so that they can make better decisions as they move forward. And this isn't just kind of made up, thought experiments about crisis. This is actually based on real data about trauma and about how people go through lived experiences of crisis. And so an often and kind of completely overlooked in a business setting factor is that crisis and trauma really profoundly impact people's mental capacity. So what does that mean short term? It can be cortisol flooding. So the cortisol floods because someone is in anxiety and panic. It triggers anxiety and panicked behavior. Well, what does that mean if you're the advisor? That means you're working with someone who may be cool, calm, and collected on the surface, but internally is feeling the effects of deep stress, which, as you could imagine, impacts their decision-making ability. Long-term, the effects are even more pronounced. Long-term stress, and you may have this in business clients that you've worked with, where the issue goes on for years, or there's kind of lengthy litigation or lengthy regulatory review, that actually long-term trauma can shrink the hippocampus, so the part of our brain, and impair memory and cognition. So it creates this kind of self-perpetuating process that makes it, again, harder and harder for someone to make good decisions in crisis because they're experiencing all of these different factors. In my work in hospice and in kind of end of life with families that are grieving and with the patients, sometimes people call this grief brain. And it's the actual fog that people experience when they're in pronounced crisis, when they're experiencing grief, that the back of their brain is constantly kind of chewing on the issue that they're facing, which means that their focus and cognition can be somewhat impaired when they're working kind of at the forefront. So it's just worth keeping these things in mind as you think about someone who's experiencing a business crisis.